Hello everyone, I am Tacet, and today I'm going to be going over the new Gems of War faction of City of Thieves, as well as some teams for it, and pretty much everything related to it. So the very first and blatant thing to mention right off the bat is this is essentially, if not the, best delve in the entire game now. This is mainly because it has 3 guaranteed treasure rooms, with 2 rooms that could potentially also end up being a treasure room, making it the highest amount of guaranteed treasure rooms in the game. It also has all 3 of those treasure rooms, only 1 room off from the starting room, so if they're a Cedric, you can simply start getting that gold immediately. And it has 2 tier 5 rooms. Prior to this, the best delve in the game would have been considered for overall loot Silver Necropolis. However, with this most recent faction, City of Thieves could be considered slightly better. If you're already using Silver Necropolis, you probably want to stay and just keep using it for now, just because it's not much of a switch. But if you're doing something like Warrens, or if you don't really have a designated farming delve yet to do your daily delves on, you might want to consider keeping City of Thieves at a low level, something like level 20, something like level 100, 110, somewhere around there, just so you can keep repeating it for your daily delves in order to farm it, and then just raise all your other delves up while keeping this one at a lowerish level. I'll personally be leveling it because it's required for the kingdom, but it's definitely one to consider, because the treasure room is right over here 100% of the time, treasure room over here 100% of the time, treasure room over here 100% of the time, and both of these can still be the Cedric room, which also counts as a treasure room, and those 2 5s would normally have around a 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 multiplier. They can have a 1.2, but on average, I believe this kind of room averages probably a little bit above a 1.35 or so as far as its overall percent that you end up getting as higher multiplier. But yeah, really great delve layout. Pretty much the most perfect delve layout you can ever have. So definitely a good place to go make your home kingdom if you don't already have one. Other than that, let's go into a bunch of teams with this. So there are several various teams that you can end up using for various things. I'll be showing at least one of them real quick. The main one being this one. This is a pretty traditional team right now. For any delve that can run it, you probably should be running it. It's Forest Troll, Double King, Gob Truffle, and then Weapon. What specifically run for your weapon can vary depending on what you have. Most ideal is Doomed Glaive or Doomed Club, one of the 2 brown or green Doom weapons, with the green one being better just because it creates a green storm to keep going off of if you so need it. However, if you don't have these slightly expensive doomed weapons, you can go for something a little bit cheaper like Shegar's Heart and just put that there instead. As far as hero class, you're generally going to want to go Warden or Titan. Titan using the little extra elemental thing so that they gain life. Or Warden. Main reason for Warden is it's the only hero class in the entire game that has both Dispel and Greenstorm, both of which just needs Greenstorm to end up infinitely looping off of Forest Troll, Gob Truffle, and the Dispel is to make sure you don't have to deal with Submerge or Barrier when you're going through it. But of course, you just double the green, get everything rolling. Then the Gob Truffles just keep doing their thing over and over again, and then you just infinitely loop that until you win. And if you lose it, you just simply go cast Forest Troll again with the mana that you accumulated, repeat it all again, and you can occasionally cast the weapon. But more often than not, you barely even touch the weapon. And that's what I'm personally running for the entirety of it. For Pure Faction, obviously, we'll be switching and moving over to 500 Pure Faction if you are. Though to keep in mind, again, if you are farming this faction, you might want to keep it deliberately at a lower level. But for this, we can end up going with basically just Tomb Robber spam. Tomb Robber is the strongest thing that ends up coming from this faction. What it ends up doing is it ends up skull spamming. Generally, gem spawns and stuff like that aren't the greatest of things. However, it can get a 14 skull spam from having enough gold, and you don't really require that much gold for it either. You only end up needing, let's see, a -6 from that, you end up needing 8, so 8 to 5, that's 40. You only end up needing 40 gold in order to get the full capacity of this. That might sound like a little bit higher than like a normal kind of boost ratio thing, but it really isn't, especially because of extreme greed. This gives an additional 4 gold. Every single thing within the faction has this, and this ends up making it so you end up gaining a substantial amount more gold. And with that being said, yeah, there are several things within this faction. There's really only one relevant thing, though, her. But as far as what's actually available, if you were to use Pure Faction, there's Cat Burglar. This is basically useless. It's the last 2 enemies. If the enemy dies, you gain a little bit of gold in an extra turn. This is basically going to be useless in any part of the game. I would not use this. It is just useless. Just ignore it. This legend has some potential for early game, mid game, though I wouldn't really use it much beyond that. Deals a bunch of damage to all enemies and then gains 3 to all skills, boosted by gold. With normal gold capacity of 100 without it being boosted by anything, that would end up being 23 stats when reaching max gold. If you do one Cedric, that'll be 43 stats. Biggest issue is that it just takes a while to get rolling, and also you can't get any higher than that. Realistically, 43 unless you have a Cedric room in play is going to be the highest that you can really end up increasing that with within one cast. So obviously, if you're at a lower level range where you're fighting things similar to your level, like PvP or something, this could potentially be decent, particularly again earlier or mid game. But later in the game, where stats are higher for basically everything as well as PvP, you're generally not going to be touching this thing at all. He also has really underwhelming traits, only being able to get the extra gold. The Delve thing will be useless in PvP context, where he's mostly only going to be used. And the 10 gold whenever he takes damage is pretty irrelevant, especially since that's barely any gold, and you generally wouldn't want to be like deliberately trying to take damage unless he gets like poison or bled, in which that would be somewhat beneficial. But even then, there's much better ways to gain gold. These two are quite a bit more decent, though, at least Street Thief within the context of this delve. It ends up stealing all enemy gold, which in most contexts isn't really that good, though if your enemy is running a gold-related team, that is good, and obviously this delve has 2 gold-related teams, the first one and the final one, and it ends up creating a bunch of purple. It's a static amount of 6, and ends up creating an additional 1 for every single 3 gold that you have up to 30. So if you have 30 gold, you'll end up doing the full capacity of 16 gold. Biggest issue with this is, or 16 purple gems, I mean. The biggest issue with this, of course, is you're stealing all the gold from the enemy, so unless they're immediately getting all or most of their gold back, only your first cast is really going to be good, and then like every other cast is going to be pretty bad, since she's only going to do like 6 to 8 rather than the full 16. So do be mindful of that when you are casting her, if you are using her as a mana generation. But you're definitely going to be needing it for when you're running pure factions, because half the battles you'll be doing, the first and final battle of your 3 battles, will be gold related and will be able to counter such. And also has 20% dodge, which is useful given that we are going to be spamming a lot of skulls with a Tome Robber, which ends up doing those 14 skulls. You keep spamming over and over again. She also has 20 dodge herself, and the whole premise of this team is just to use your enchant that you'll be gaining from potion effects if you so get them, assuming you're doing it during an event, and then you just simply use those in combination with the Street Thief to fill them back up and to counter out the enemy, to essentially just scroll spam the enemy down and hopefully just get an infinite off that. Won't be exactly infinite, but ideal here is Tome Robber, Tome Robber, Tome Robber, Street Thief again, repeat, is ideally what will happen. And between the in-between time, the enemy would hopefully get enough gold that you can just keep Street Thiefing every single time and get a decent amount of mana generation. Probably not all 3 filled, but at least the first 2 every time after the enchants end up wearing off. So that's what you can end up running for pure faction. As far as the higher level faction team, if you don't want to run the Truffles, you can just simply run with a Iron Gut related team. Several ways that you can do this with Mountain Crusher, Apothecary, and things like that. For example, Zugoff you can end up replacing with Apothecary and moving it up some. Possessed King you can end up replacing with a Queen Isabel, or you can end up going down the Mirage Queen route, either or. Ends up working out pretty decently. Iron Gut's the only thing that doesn't really have a replacement, and obviously you just run a Titan Mountain Crusher in first slot to hold down the team and mana generate for you. If you need a lower cost faction team, one thing that you can do is actually use the Tome Robber to kind of skull spam off of. Mang, building anything around Mang is generally a good way to go. Mang Titan, and just use that however you can. With the Alderfather, you're going to be wanting to use this in order to spam out your damage output. You're going to be using this in combination with Tome Robber in order to skull spam into Mang. Alderfather, while a legend, is a faction legend, so it's pretty easy to obtain. Tome Robber, again, the epic from this faction, is also pretty easy to obtain. And then we have a Lapina Explorer, mainly in order to remove or reorder the enemy team. Sometimes they'll end up having a order in which you might not necessarily want to deal with their first slot, either a high skull reduction or dodge, or there's any kind of effect where you might want to just move it out of the way. And this will basically just be there to use the rest of your color and to act as that purpose in order to reorder the opposing team if you so choose. And that's pretty much all you're going to need for that. Basically just a standard Mang skull spam team. And other than that, just something to show for PvP when we go head over there. I guess we'll start slowly heading over there, as well as using the team. That notification is excessively late. This event has been going on for some time now. One other thing to mention real quick. This faction, of course, is associated to Leonis Empire. With that being said, this power level of the kingdom can now reach 16 stars. This does require having a second Leonis Empire pet. In order to have a second Leonis Empire pet, you do have to have 2,000 renown for this current faction. So do be mindful if you do take this faction as your place to farm, that you will not be able to get this kingdom up beyond 14 stars anytime soon, even though it can, I believe, currently be 15 star to 16 star. I'm pretty sure it's 16 starred, but you cannot currently get that unless you have this pet, or unless another pet comes around. And just be mindful of that if you do keep it at a lower level, as if you keep it at a lower level, like 20 or 100 or somewhere around there, that you will not be able to get this pet, since your renown will not be able to go high enough to be able to get to 2,000 renown required to get that pet. So do be mindful of that if you do that. Also, one other thing to be mindful, of course, is we do have the new scroll system. And one thing that you could be throwing those scrolls in if you want to, once we start getting a little bit more, is this kingdom right here. Kingdom bonus could potentially help pure faction a little bit if you're using multiple different kinds. Even just using 2 different types, it would theoretically slightly benefit from having that. Though the biggest benefit that would gain is on level 12 and 14 on factions now. We do have the ability to gain faction Hoard stats. This does not increase your overall stats. However, what it does increase is the specific Hoard level. So for example, if we go to our Hoard over here, you can see we currently have it at level 200. Getting those 50% extra stats by eventually getting it to 14 would allow us to move these up by 50%. So instead of having 36 attack, we'd end up having 52, somewhere around there. But we'd have a higher, like 50% higher stats than what we would normally have given if we didn't have those bonuses. So if you are keeping this as the delve that you're farming or just want to upgrade it into the future, you might want to consider getting Leonis Empire, your blue scrolls, in order to, or your blue deeds, I should say, in order to get that bonus, especially if you're considering farming it on a daily basis. So yeah, make sure to do that if you choose to. So 2 things I want to go do real quick. Just go and do a battle or 2 within the faction, as well as show a little bit of a PvP team for it. There's quite a few possible PvP teams that we could possibly end up building out of it that would end up fitting into various scroll teams. I have not tested extensively with it, but I will be into the future, and hopefully we'll end up finding something that's relatively meta. For now, I'm just going to be showing after this like a pure purple team for it, since that's the most relevant thing coming soon is a purple guild war. But I feel like there's probably something pretty broken that can be used with her. 14 skull spam definitely is not a small amount. If I'm not mistaken, that's actually the highest amount of skull gem spawn in the game, if I'm not mistaken. And if not, it's very close. Obviously, things can create more skulls than that, like for example Bone Dragon, but not with as much consistency as she can, where it doesn't have any real condition other than initially getting that gold. Whereas Bone Dragon, if enemies' armor is all gone, then it won't be able to do that anymore. But as long as she still has that gold and nothing really lowers that gold, she'll just be able to keep going over and over again. Think about over and over again. Of course, one of the reasons to use your Truffle team is it is infinite. You can just keep getting infinite damage off it, and regardless of what level you're running it at, it can end up winning quickly. As far as the order of this delve, it can vary quite a bit because these rooms and treasure rooms can go all over the place as far as what kind of multipliers they have. But you generally want to be scouting 4 rooms first, and that is this room right over here in the top right, this room right over here in the bottom right, this room over here in the top left, and this room over here in the bottom left. So as we can see from these multipliers, we're going to want to do these 2 5 rooms. Then we are going to want to do these 2 4 rooms, and then we can worry about treasure room order, in which case we'd obviously want to take this for the 1.4, then most likely this for the 1.3, and then this is like a 1.25 or something, or 1.2. And that would generally be our order. If we are going in multiplier order, you will always want to go and take this one first in most situations, unless these are 1.4 or higher. If these are 1.3 and lower, you'll automatically know if there is a treasure room, one of these 3. If it is a tier 5 treasure room, there is only 1 multiplier for it currently, and is a 1.4. So you can know without even clicking on it what that is going to be. So if you did want to do multiplier order, of course, it would be doing that one first, then these 2, then the 1.3, then the 1.25s, and then ending with the 1.2. But from a loot order, you're generally going to want to save all of these loot rooms for last, and we just simply do these 2. Go for those 2, take the 1.4, take the 1.3, and then take the 1.2. And just for fun, real quick, we'll just go take another one, and we'll throw it against the Glaceons. But for the most part, I'm just going to be running this through the entirety of the faction. There's nothing that this will really lose to. Once it gets infiniting, it just auto wins. And if you feel like you're going to be pressured with some kind of damage, you can simply just take a skull, and that will entangle them. And that's pretty much all you have to do. And then you just infinitely loop. Cast Truffle, cast Grain, or cast Troll. And just keep repeating it until the enemy is dead. And if there's freeze in the delve and you want protection against it, of course you can replace out that weapon with Chugger's Heart. You'll notice in most of these battles, or at least all the battles I'm doing right now, we have not cast that weapon a single time. You do not need to use Doomglaive there. It's mostly just to help speed it up. But Chugger's Heart's probably your next best bet for it. But yeah, that's all we have to do all the way through all the factions. One thing I do want to mention real quick before I go show the other team, because I'm not actually going to be showing anything with it, and that's mainly this Night Dagger. Night Dagger is kind of similar to that one red Guild War troop, that one dwarf, where it ends up doing triple damage to an enemy, in this particular instance, Yellow Day. The main reason why this is not going to be viable, the red one was somewhat viable because Red Guild War Day, all of its good barrier options are pretty much under Mythic. So if people didn't have it, then you didn't really need to worry as much. However, Yellow Guild War Day, almost every single good barrier option in the entire game, if not every single option, is underneath yellow. So using a single target ability is going to be very, very bad on Yellow Guild War Day on your defense team, because if they really needed to, if they didn't already have it, they could easily put a barrier like Dragonian Monk or any of the billion other options that Yellow has in order to barrier the last slot. So you're not really ever going to want to use this weapon in a Guild War context, or really ever for the most part, just because most Yellow teams, if they don't already have a barrier, could simply just adjust one single troop and have a viable barrier option on it. And given that this only hits once with no dispel or no nothing like that, it is going to be useless against Yellows, despite the fact that it can do triple damage to them. So you're pretty much just going to want to ignore this weapon. Of course, you can get it for completionist purposes, might be needed for kingdom upgrades eventually and stuff like that. But as far as its actual usefulness, this weapon is useless. But again, you still might want to get it, just because it might be months before you can end up getting it again. Anyways, one last thing I just want to show real quick, and that's just a PvP team that ends up incorporating the Tome Robber, specifically a pure purple that uses no mythics. Kind of something mid-range for people if you wanted to try it. I wouldn't really necessarily advise this for Purple Guild War, but if you wanted to try it, it's worth a shot. I love this premise of troop. I still have a lot of testing I need to do before I can really come up with anything that might be too broken with this, if there even is anything. Tome Robber is obviously going to be really good in Leprechaun-related teams, particularly Leprechaun-related Skull Spam teams, since she would end up getting most of the gold that she needs immediately, if not all of it immediately, and then you can just keep spamming. And one nice thing about her is, unlike many of the meta, much of the meta right now, which requires alignment in order to get their skull spam, she does not require alignment. So like right now, we don't have any alignment for anything else. We can simply just cast this and boom, get an extra turn. Obviously, that won't always extra turn, but given that you have other skull spam options on your team, you're normally going to be able to pull it off, or at least be able to set up the board in a turn or two to be able to get a decent cast off with her. So basically, we just double check our convert every single time. If we don't have it, we cast her. She's almost always going to extra turn if you have about like 10 or more skulls on the board, which with another skull spammer you're normally going to have. If we need to clear the board, we can simply use this. Umberwolf here is purely for the purple. You could just use a hero there too, or something else if you want, or reorder into another skull spam if you really want to. However, I'm mainly just using that for the purple storm in order to just keep our mana up. As you can see, most of this battle we have full mana on essentially the entire team. So right here, we don't really have any good option. I guess we'll try for her. We could do a Glaceon here. We don't have alignment, but it's going to explode enough that it would be fine. But we'll try gambling with her. It's such a high skull spam that we're normally going to get an extra turn. And as you can see, we actually did get an extra turn there. Not only that, but we also, we overkilled, and it was still our turn. So obviously not necessarily something you'd want to run for Purple Day. It's a little bit towards a riskier side, but if you don't have any option, that's not the most expensive of things. For no mythics, it's pretty solid for a purple team, so maybe worth trying if you don't already have something for purple and you have the components. But yeah, Tome Robber has a lot of potential into the future. Definitely a troop to keep an eye on, because as more troops come into the game, particularly double converting troops that do skull spam, the more combinations that this ends up getting useful for is just going to keep making it stronger and stronger. And it's going to be a great alternative utility rather than having to use 2 double converts. You can use various double converts or skull spams with a actual spawn. While double converts tend to almost always be better than spawns, this is a big enough spawn of 14 that is normally not going to miss. Also, most teams do not run anything that will deplete down your gold. While there are options that do that, very, very few like PvP teams or stuff like that are going to waste an entire slot just to zero out your gold. Nothing like that is ever meta on defend. So yeah, she's always going to be able to, basically in most battles, like 99% of battles, be able to, once she gets her gold capacity, she'll be able to keep it for the entire battle. Basically meaning her 13 mana cost cast becomes a 14 skull spam, which is not too bad for the mana cost to be able to consistently do that, what is essentially 100% of the time. And she even has skull dodge if she needs it. But anyways, guys, and as well as gold in order to get it up initially if you're not doing like Leprechaun or something else to end up getting it up. But anyways, guys, I believe that's everything for the faction. If you still have any other questions or concerns, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a wonderful weekend. Best of luck with the event. And don't forget, if you do want to keep it as a farming delve, do not do the event. Because if you do end up doing the event, anything that you do during the faction event does permanently raise the delve. So if you end up doing the delve to like 200, like for example, I have the delve right now. I should probably mention this. I'm pretty sure most people know, but just in case before we go, right now you can see this delve is at 190 because we were doing it through the event. But you may have noticed earlier, like at the beginning of the stream, if I showed this, it currently shows it's only at level 40 because I'm deliberately delaying this delve for later just so it's a little bit lower level. However, this delve is not actually level 40. If I go and do this delve right now to full completion, which obviously I won't do right now, but if I was to go do this delve right now to full completion, its actual level is 180, as you can see from here. So if we were to finish this delve, the very next delve we would do is a 190, not a 50. So do be mindful of that. If any progress that you do in the delve event will carry over to your actual delve permanently. So yeah, don't accidentally overlevel it if you are planning on actually farming it as your daily farming delve with your 3 scrolls that you get every day. Anyways, guys, I'll wrap it up for now. I'll catch all of you later, and goodbye, everyone. Have a good weekend.